Okay, now we are recording. Now I'm going to share screen. I got all the mechanics going good. So Sarah, do you see my module 4 discussion materials?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. So really how I am handling this, as I get my thoughts together about the concepts of student rights in a school setting. I wanted to frame my thoughts instead of, well, one, I don't want to work off the cuff, anything like that. That's kind of dangerous to do when it comes to school law issues. And again, I try to be very careful that we talk about these things, and I'm very open to answering questions, but my answers will come from the point of view of a retired school principal. And I am not an attorney, and I don't try to sound like one. So I need to be careful as we talk about things that encourage people to be in touch with their own the school attorney and that kind of stuff when there are issues. But how I was framing my thoughts, I am using a true public school law textbook, which I know there are no textbooks for this course, but this public school law 7th edition is where I was refreshing my mind on the concepts. What I did, I just rented for about $29. I rented this until about January, I think. So it's actually a pretty good deal, and it's the hardcover book costs like $150, which we don't do that stuff anymore. So so a lot of the information, I framed it in roughly 2 chapters, chapters 4 and chapter 7 out of this book to get my mind back around the concepts and to remind me the key points that I want to talk about. And then just to frame the conversation. And if those of you out in Zoom land, be sure to ask questions if you want to. I mean, you don't have to, of course, and you don't have to turn the cameras on. Don't care about that. So really, the concepts we talk about are student rights in school, and the iconic phrase that students do not shed their constitutional rights. No, neither students nor teachers, because the same idea, shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. That comes from Tinker versus Des Moines. That was a court case back in the early 70s. It had to do with symbolic opposition to the Vietnam War, and students were punished for wearing black armbands, and case made it all the way to the Supreme Court. And it is the landmark case that we often talk about when it comes from that. And I'm not going to get into when I took this class a zillion years ago, we spent a lot of time talking about case laws and cases and that kind of stuff, and that's not really what I want to do. But the idea that one of the first times is getting to the Supreme Court, the idea that students have First Amendment rights in school, and that's really what this came from here. And so and so it's an example of First Amendment, but it is symbolic First Amendment, first symbolic speech. The students were not causing disruption. They were not saying anything. They were just wearing armbands, which the concept that comes from that we take away from that is that one, students have rights, and two, and it's written down in the text of the court case, the judges tended to expect school people to expect some disruption, that free speech comes at the price of some disruption, and that you have to be able to articulate the thing that's going to happen, or the expression the students have on the frame of has there been a disruption to the learning environment, or do you expect a substantial disruption to the learning environment? And so um, the case law also says it's really not about the teachers being disrupted. It's about students being disrupted. And so it just comes to the territory that you just have to accept some of that. I remember a student when I was assistant principal that wore bright blue hair to school one day, and the other assistant principal got all over him and told him to don't come to school the next day with your hair that color. And I thought to myself, oh my. In fact, the other assistant principal asked me what I thought. It was after the fact. And I said, well, you'll have a dozen kids with blue hair tomorrow. And we did. The day after that, there were 50. And it ended up with a couple hundred kids out on the lawn with blue hair and 3 television trucks. And so learned the hard way. And bluntly, I was not the one that stuck my head into that hornet's nest. And if he'd asked me, I'd have said, look the other way, because there had not been a disruption to the classroom yet. And so that's the blue hair case that I talk about. And so really, I kept trying to tell him to back off a little bit. No, it kept going and going. So that eventually all went away. The next year, when a student like that wore bright blue hair to school, nobody said a thing, and we made a point of just not snapping at the bait. Sometimes I think of the mental image of school leaders and kids troll like they're topwater baits for a bass fisherman, and the bass comes from below and has to take the bite. And sometimes you learn as a principal, you learn to avoid those, and you try not to get you try to avoid taking the bite of things. Hello, Dr. Fott, I see you there. Brad, what I was talking about was the idea that school principals need to learn the hard way through experience, when to look the other way and when not to take the bite if a student is trying to suck you into an argument, if you can help it. So I'll just keep talking and feel free to jump in anytime you want to, Brad.
Yes, sir.
So, and Brad, I was just talking about the classic Tinker versus Des Moines back in the 70s, and the idea that students have First Amendment rights, and teachers do too, First Amendment rights in the schoolhouse. And so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to keep scrolling down here, and you all feel free to chime in, stop me, ask questions. And it gets down here, and whether this case here, this Scott versus School Board of Alachua County, has to do with the Confederate flag, which comes and goes as an issue. And so the courts have said that you can try to stop something in advance if you can articulate well that there's a good chance that it will lead to substantial disruption in the school setting. And so probably in a lot of schools now, if a lot of students want to march around out in the parking lot with Confederate flags flying from the back of their trucks, which I've dealt with that too, it would probably be a pretty big disruptive event. And so I learned as principal to try to deal with that one-on-one with their boys, and I was fortunate. Lucky may not be the word, but I was fortunate to be able to let them know that, guys, you just don't need the hassle and the headache and the uproar that it's going to cause. And 9 times out of 10, they put the flags away and went on to class. I did know that I was going to have to deal with it if that wasn't good enough. Brad, do you see much of the Confederate flag down your way right now in Arkansas?
You know, we've got a real unique school district. We most of our school districts in our area are very homogeneous. We're not. We're very diverse. We've got probably 40% African American, 40% Caucasian, and 20% something else. Our kids do great. We have kids that I've had a 6'4" boy that will come to school wearing full drag every day, and nobody says a word to him. Matter of fact, I say sometimes I worry our kids are too accepting of everything. I mean, they just do real well together. We'd had some concerns voiced to me before the school year started because of some of the unrest, and I said our kids will do better than adults do, and our kids just do great. I don't know. We're fortunate now. We've got a area technical center behind us, and there's 2 or 3 boys that they're not part of our school, but they drive a old pickup truck with rebel flags up the back and stuff like that every day. But I've never really heard much from it with our kids. So no, we're fortunate like that.
So the concept is, and I hear you saying it, Brad, the concept is as a school leader, if there has not been a disruption, and the phrase leave a sleeping dog lie may come to play, if there's not been a disruption yet, you just kind of hold your breath and well, it's not perfect, but again, the courts expect there to be some disruption, and know that if you think there's going to be some disruption, you could work on it. But what I hear Dr. Fott saying is that the rebel flag on the small, because you have a big school, I believe,
Yes,
the small example of it sounds like most of the kids are just ignoring it, and if you jumped on it as a principal, you might flame it up and make it worse.
Well, in our situation, like I said, our technical center is connected with our building. So there are students from 8 different campuses that aren't my students. They park in a different parking lot. And I think the parking lot's small. I think very few of my kids are even aware of that just kept kids, driving an old truck like that anyway. So
yeah. Okay. So all right, I'm gonna keep going on here. Now this is something that Hazelwood versus Kuhlmeyer. The idea that, well, no, I'm gonna back up just a touch here. Yeah. Okay, so there are times when schools and principals can dive in to, well, censor is a strong word. I was never a fan of that word as a principal. But Bethel versus Frazier was dealt with a speech that someone gave. It was an election speech, and it was full of vulgarities and stuff like that. And the student got in trouble, took him to court, and the courts ruled for the school leadership. And so basically saying that schools have a role in maintaining the environment and the academic environment, and so that the schools can dive in if somebody's obviously lewd, vulgar, and indecent. But you need to be able to articulate that. And that Hazelwood versus Kuhlmeyer had to do with the principal censoring an article in the student newspaper. And so again, the word censorship was something that I was never a fan of as a principal, and I was fortunate that I had good student newspaper sponsors. And in the 8 years I was in that building, not once did I censor anything in the newspaper, and I didn't want to. I didn't censor the graduation speeches. I didn't want to. And I just trusted my faculty to be working behind the scenes and working with kids and, trying to do a good job using those as teachable moments. But technically, if the school district is sponsoring the student newspaper, the principal can, the leadership can have control over the content. And that goes back and forth. I've had some principals get taken to task about that, but so far, if I understand right, the courts have been fairly agreeable to the principals having control over that. I'm just going to keep scrolling down here. The idea, and anybody in the school world right now definitely knows the power of online communications, how painful they can be. That the courts have ruled that in general, the principals can dive in and influence things if if it has an impact on the learning environment. But if it does, so it doesn't even have to originate at school. If the principal, I'll keep putting it this way, can really articulate how it has an impact back at the school, which again is an important point. You learn over time where those impacts will be, and you can predict some of them. This talks about prior restraint, distribution of literature. Okay, so used to be people would want to distribute Bibles at school, and that's an example of the time, place, and manner. We didn't say much about it, just on the street corner across from school, and not have an issue with it. So so you will have a lot of outside influences wanting to reach in and distribute things to your kids, and you have to be neutral with that. You can't be content specific in your decisions. It's good if you have a policy in place where you control the time, place, and manner where information, if it's shared on school grounds and shared to students. In general, there's lots of examples of if you allow one group or one person to have access to your school or your students, then you are in general expected to be very permissive to other groups. That's a slippery slope. So prior restraint, I don't know if I want to, I'll pause there. Does anybody have any questions? Or Brad, you want to chime in or anything?
No, sir. No. I was trying to think. I think the Bible issue. I think I was trying to think. It's been a long time since the Gideons or any group have come in and want to give out Bibles, but I want to think the last time we did, we made them available. Might be in our library. I don't know. Just as if kids wanted them, let them know they were there. But I don't think we flat, shut it down. But I think we just, when I was a kid, they came by every classroom and gave me one. But I think a lot of times we think that maybe the library is a place for, place where you can have. I think it's a little different if you got things in the library than you got in the classroom, because kids have options in the library. So kind of the way I've always looked at it a little bit.
The Gideons may be a little bit of an old example. Now my high school was out of the edge of town. It didn't have easy ways for people to walk up and want to do that. So it really wasn't a real common issue. I would deal with people wanting to come on school grounds and put flyers on the cars and that kind of stuff. And I frowned on that more than anything, because you walk out there and there's 400 flyers under the windshields of 400 kids, and most of the kids just take the piece of paper and let go of it, and it just made such a mess. So more than anything, that was my angle there. It just made such a mess, and so that was my angle there. So just kind of scrolling down here, the student initiated clubs, the concept there, and maybe you all know this, that the general thinking is that if you allow students to create non-curricular based clubs, then you pretty much have to allow most other clubs to be formed if they want to be formed. You can't deny it based on religion, political, philosophical, or content. And in quotation, if you allow one, must allow all. That's kind of a broad statement, maybe a little too broad. Now the phrase here, every decision you make as a school leader is a precedent. And I used to say, what I did for one student, I'm ready to do for 1,000 students. And Brad's building is even bigger than that. And I had a lot of times when I have people ask me to do something for their son or their daughter, I would pause and I would literally ask them that question back. Say, do you realize that every decision that I make is a precedent? And what I do for your son or daughter, I have to be ready to do for all 100, all 1,000 students in the school. And a lot of times that would make people stop and think, well, yeah, that's a good point. So that was the point of view that I came with, and it tended to work. The appearance, I worked in a building, and where we did have a big gang influence at one time. And so we spent a lot of time working with the regional area gang educators and the probation and parole people and the police department and things like that. I became rather adept at recognizing gang signs and that kind of stuff, and more so than I wanted to be. And so the idea is that if you have an educational reason for restrictions, then the school can weigh in. And you all know this. I was fortunate that both my assistant principals were females. And so if girls wanted to wear really, really skimpy clothes, that could be a distraction to the educational setting. You know, I was fortunate that my female administrators could have those conversations a lot easier than I could. And so wasn't exactly why I hired female assistant principals. It tended to work out though. So let's see, extracurricular, okay. I want to get into procedural safeguards. I want to get into a little bit about the differences between expulsion and suspension. And sometimes people get those two words confused. Expulsion, the words here, I said remove for a long time. It's overstating it to say that you would expel a student and they're gone forever. Life's not that simple. Especially if the student has an IEP, then it doesn't alleviate the school from responsibility of ensuring that the content of the IEP is still delivered. So expulsion, a long time, tends to be more serious things, of course, usually weapons. So what I did here, I cut and pasted straight out of the textbook. I have this link here. Talks about the expulsion, at least in Missouri, Arkansas may be a touch different, flows from the Board of Education. The principal generally can suspend about 10 days, superintendent 90 or so, kind of varies state to state. Over that, then the school board starts getting involved. And this talks about the procedural safeguard, the due process that students have to be expelled from school. They have the courts have ruled that students have a property right to an education. Written charges, hearing, legal counsel, these things might be state specific also. Present witnesses, cross-examine. Those are concepts in expulsions. A little bit different if we're talking about a suspension, which most of the time in the principal's world, up to about 10 days. So I'm going to keep going down here, but it took me to a concept I wanted to share, that zero tolerance policies, and the idea that there's really no such thing as automatic consequence. That sometimes some schools went overboard trying to keep the environment safe, and rightfully so, that they didn't give themselves any latitude. If a student drew a picture of a handgun on a piece of paper, they had to be suspended. It took some of the common sense out of it. So the thinking is to try to allow yourself some room, common sense room in the handbooks, but the idea that really no such thing as automatic consequence. I'll tell you why I say that. The landmark case Goss versus Lopez was the case where the courts talked about procedural due process for short-term suspensions. And really in-school suspensions, technically, that, again, I just cut and pasted to be accurate. Tell the student the nature of the violation, give them a chance to refute the charges, and explain the evidence. So really, when it comes to in-school suspension or short-term out-of-school suspension, these are the processes that you're supposed to go through to make it completely legal. And it just makes sense. You tell a student what's going on, give them a chance to hear their side of the story, and you explain your way through it. And that's the procedural due process that students have for short-term suspensions. The idea that I put up here about no such thing as automatic consequences, I have had students that left the school in handcuffs, involved in public affray. They got a big fight. The police got there, hauled them off, and they're old enough, they went downtown. Technically, I mean, even though that they knew that they're going to be suspended at least 10 days, technically, they needed to hear that from me. Technically, I needed to hear their side of the story before we really finish the whole situation and impose the suspension. Sometimes it's a little bit awkward. I'd be calling home at night, get hold of mom and dad and say, well, yeah, that was kind of a bad day, wasn't it? Talk our way through it. But the student has a right to say their side of the story. And even if they have a gun or a weapon or drugs or something really awful, technically, they have the procedural due process. And you don't want to miss that. You don't want it to potentially set yourself up for an argument from an attorney later. Corporal punishment, I'm not going to spend much time on that. It's technically legal in the state of Missouri. Most school districts that I've interacted with by board policy do not have it. Now, Brad, is corporal punishment legal in the state of Arkansas?
It's still technically legal. School Board Association about 15 years ago, our governing board said that basically we were on our own if we did.
Yeah.
So it pretty much ended it for me.
Yeah. Same here. We just and as a teacher or principal, I didn't want to be another person hitting on a kid. That was my take on it. And I just never even wanted to go there. Now there is a concept. I did have an attorney mention in a meeting one time that corporal punishment is technically broader than just giving kids swats. Physical punishment came about with a teacher in a classroom was having his students that are misbehaving. Instead of being sent to the office, he was having them do push-ups. Okay, pretty good classroom management. That technical had to say, be aware that technically, my understanding is that technically those push-ups could be considered a version of corporal punishment. And by board policy, that's not permissible. And his eyes got big. He said, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. Now, was it a big deal? Not really. And it was giving students a choice, not be sent to the office. Yeah, but I felt like as principal, I didn't want to get backed into a corner with that. Search and seizure. Now, you may or may not know this, that principals have a different level of suspicion before they can conduct a search. And it's reasonable suspicion, while a police officer needs probable cause. And so if I felt like there was contraband or something that did not belong at school, and I was talking to a student, I would articulate what my suspicion was, that what it was I'd be looking for. And the school resource officer was almost never in the room. If the school resource officer was involved in the conversation or the search, then it'd fall under his level of probable cause. So the courts have given school people a lot of latitude with searching lockers. If I did, I always made sure I could easily articulate what it was I was looking for and why I felt like I needed to search that locker. And the lockers are owned by the school. And we always made sure that any locks that were on the lockers were school supplied locks, so that students knew that technically we could have access if we needed to. Backpacks, the more invasive you get with a search, the stronger your reasonable suspicion needs to be. And technically, asking people to take off their coats, take off their shoes, take off their socks those have been called strip searches. And so just need to be really careful about that. And if I was looking for a weapon or something like that, then I would be a lot more insistent and a lot more intrusive, because your level of concern rises up. And I would tell students, if I was looking for a weapon, I would say, I can't let you leave the office until I'm sure there's not a weapon. And my school resource officer is very clear. If I thought it was a firearm or something like that I was looking for, he wanted to be there. And I was aware that the differences between reasonable suspicion, probable cause. Maybe he was outside my office door where the student knew he was there. So I could still work under my level of reasonable suspicion. But he wanted to make clear that if we found a weapon, he wanted to be involved in it, and rightfully so, just for the safety of it. So,
Dr. Gordon,
yeah, go ahead.
just a quick question. So if there's an officer in the room, you said, is it under his probable cause? Sorry, I just missed that little part. If you could just repeat that, that'd be great.
It is my understanding that if the school resource officer is involved, or maybe using his influence by being an intimidating factor in the room, that the courts might say you needed probable cause for that search. Okay, definitely if the police officer approaches a student in the office, it falls under his level as a police officer, not your level as a principal.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I will tell you that there have been times when I've been rather abrasive if I thought a handgun was on a student. We've had to empty a room before, and because we thought a student had a handgun in his front pocket of his hoodie, and it was me and 4 police officers, and the kid reached into his pocket, and we pounced on him, and he did not have a gun. I don't know what he was thinking, but that was a time I got to realize I was the closest, and my hands were in deepest. And so as a principal, you just do those things, and not till later you realize that could have been really bad. But and Brad would probably agree. If you think there's a weapon, you have a legal and a moral obligation to deal with it.
Yeah, I had a kid that came from Hurricane Katrina when it hit. He'd been in my building for about 5 days. He's about 6'2", and I had a report that he had a gun. And at that time, we couldn't have a record from any of the kids that had moved in because the federal government said we couldn't ask for records because we had to take them. We had a bunch of evacuees, and he had a loaded Glock in his front pocket. And I'd messed up. I didn't get my SRO with me because, frankly, it was just bang, bang. And he was right by me in the cafeteria. I took him off, and bent over and pulled that Glock out. And I thought, oh my gosh, this could have been bad. But I think I've taken weapons off kids twice. So we actually had another time I took one off a kid at another school, and the gun would not produce centerfire. So we went to the Arkansas Supreme Court. They were trying to say that it was not a weapon. The kids didn't know it was a weapon because it just would not work, wouldn't operate. So they're trying to get us on technicality on the explosive, but we did win in the Supreme Court, Arkansas Supreme Court, that because the kids thought it was a weapon, and they were actually shooting it earlier on the way to school, but it was just they bought it from somebody off the street. They shot it. It got hot, and they dropped it, and the barrel fell out in 2 or 3 pieces. But they brought it to school anyway, so it was a hot mess.
Oh my, yeah. I was searching a locker for drugs one time, and I lifted a jacket that was in a locker, and it was very heavy with a hunk of metal in the coat pocket. And so, when you find a gun, it's kind of it's kind of a reminder that bad things can and do happen in school. And it comes to the territory of being a principal. You just deal with that stuff. And I tell people that my wife never liked me talking about this, but I always knew that if somebody bad came to my school, want to hurt people, principals move towards loud noises. And that's just what principals do. And that's what society expects us to do, to keep the environment safe. So I don't want to spend any more time on, that have to. Let's see. But it's important. It's important, the concept between reasonable suspicion and probable cause. And it's also important that that if you're going to search students, the courts talk about was the search reasonable to begin with? Did you really think you're going to find something? And then the depth of your search, the scope of the search, was it appropriate? I mean, there have been school leaders, principals that have strip searched a kid looking for cigarettes. And you think, well, that was just silly. And then you just cause all kinds of problems. So the level of thing that you're looking for dictate the level of intrusiveness of the search. And so, if I ever had to search a kid, I always call the parents later to say, look, this is what we did. This is why we did it. I was trying to be very clear. Sometimes be called out to the parking lot to search a truck, especially around deer season. And I spent a lot of time talking to some of the boys that I knew in October, with deer season coming up in November. I would say, do not put us in a tough position. Do not forget and leave your 30-30 in the truck and come to school, because I will not have a choice in what I do. So, and also around turkey season, those of us who live in rural areas, that would happen. But knowing your students and trying to head that stuff off ahead of time, I always made a point of, in my school, maybe Brad's school the same way, walking back among the trucks around the ag building. Of course, I was a farm kid too. I could fit in well, and I just start having conversations and said, just don't put us in a tough spot, because I will not have a choice. And luckily that worked. So the angle is there, knowing your kids, trying to be proactive, trying not to make a bigger stink than you have to. Confederate flag thing. I would tell the boys, look, my whole family is from Missouri and Kentucky and Virginia. Don't talk to me about the heritage thing. Just don't need the mess that it will bring. So anyway, so really what I wanted to do was talk about some of these things, that students have rights in school, that generally school people are expected to be able to accept a little bit of disruption, and not by the teachers, or not disrupting the teachers, that you need to be able to articulate how that boy's mohawk is causing a problem in the classroom. That students have procedural rights, and that there's due process that needs to be followed if you're going to suspend a student. And technically, if you're going to place them in school suspension too, you need to be using the same concept of talking to kids about the charge and letting them give their version. And then you can drive on if you have to. And you will learn as a principal when there's more to the story and when there's not more to the story. You will learn to tell when kids are lying to you. You'll find that their stories will be very, very specific sometimes. And then they're telling a story and then they'll get very vague. And you think, okay, now you stop right there. That's when you're fibbing to me. Start over. And then you just learn how to work with kids that way. You learn to do that as low key and without the energy or the, you don't want to ramp things up if you can help them. I also want to make sure I talked about the difference between reasonable suspicion and probable cause and searching. Okay, I'll pause there and see if anybody has any questions, or give Dr. Fott a chance to share any thoughts or comments. I didn't really want to get into old war stories because actually I was telling somebody the other day that anytime principals get together, they all have stories like this. And but go ahead, Brad.
No, you're right. You're totally right. It's I was just thinking about some of the crazy things I've been through. It's in 31 years. It's really, it's you forget about half of it. But as you were talking, I thought about some of the stupid, crazy stuff I've been involved with. So
Yeah. I can tell people in my 19 now Brad's one of the few people that's been a building principal longer than I was, and I was 19 years. And in 19 years, only twice did I ever think a kid was really going to physically try me. And so that comes about, I think, with trying to know the kids, learning to not escalate if you can help it. And I had to learn that as a young principal, how to keep things calm, how to control your body language, how to choose your seating arrangements in your office. Sometimes you sit on the back side of your office, and sometimes you sit around front, side by side with a student. You learn these things, how to diffuse situations, when to be blustery and gruff, and when to be low key and disarming. And you learn these things, and generally you learn them by getting battle scars, and you think, no, boy, I need to do that different next time. And that just comes to the territory. So Sarah, Ellen, Dustin, do you have any questions before we start to wind down?
I do have a question, but it's about something from last week, actually. So it can like wait till the end, but I just didn't want to forget to ask.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So Ellen, is your question just for you personally, or an overall overarching question?
It's an overarching question.
Go ahead.
It was about, oh wait, no, this was, sorry, this was the other class. This was the MC for education, or MC education for DEI class question. But it was about ESSA. So it was, I got that mixed up with school law since it was legal.
Okay, all right. Well,
I'll just email you. It's not a big
Okay.
deal.
that'd be fine. Okay, I will start to wind down then. And I will put this recording back in the course site. And Dr. Fott, I'm glad you joined us. And hope you're enjoying your summer down there, being on the golf course a lot. And
thank you. It's been a good one.
good. All right. Well, thank you all for joining me and being guinea pigs. So let us record
Thank
something.
you, Dr. Gordon.
All right. I'm going to
Dr.
stop
Gordon,
recording.
I do have a personal question after we get done with this though.
How I do this, I'm going to stop recording.